Okay, folks, we are live.
Okay.
So we keep this open to keep as much ventilation as we can.
That's good.
The sentence door is closed.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We should probably get started. So call the meeting to order. I'm going to do a brief roll call because some of us are here and some of us are there. So Jeff? Here. Steve Geisels? Joe Soffey?
Yes.
All right. Steve Haynes is here. Patricia Oliveros is here. I can see John Palin, Jane Moore. I see Nicole and Bill is here. So I think all but Steve Geisels are accounted for. So Debbie, can you confirm we have a quorum?
No, we have a quorum.
Terrific, thanks. A motion to adopt the agenda? So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Patricia, moved by Jeff. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition to the agenda? Okay. We'll start with Nicole. Nicole, great, Steve's here, terrific. Nicole, thank you for providing us with a resort update this afternoon. It's all yours.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a while since I've seen you. So just an update for the resort. We're heading out of our summer season into kind of our shoulder season. And needless to say, it's been an absolutely challenging year, especially in the areas of staffing and supply chain. Just to give you some perspective, we usually hire 250 team members for the summer across all of our businesses within the resort and golf course. We fell short by 100 team members. We were only able to hire 150. And that's really due to just sheer staffing shortages across the county and the state, especially hitting hard hospitality industry and restaurants. So that required us to really adjust kind of our business operations. And then myself and all of our leadership team have been on the ground, cleaning rooms, serving guests, and really just trying to support our team during such a difficult time. So I just commend everybody for digging deep and really appreciate the community's support, your patience, your grace, as we now look to really rebuild. We're going to be focusing on training and customer service. We're going to be partnering with a third party in many different areas. And then within our culinary team, focus on food and beverage. We did have to hire a lot of people just new to the property because during our layoff back in last year, not everybody returned. So just a lot of change at the property, but we're committed to rebuilding. So that's exciting. As far as business goes, we are starting to see business drop off. Group travel in particular, which was coming back really strong, is now really softening. And we've seen quite a few groups cancel now for October and November as the Delta variant and the challenges with vaccinations is hitting the group market. So that's unfortunate. And CBE, which is kind of the business for hospitality, doesn't really see business coming back fully until 2023. Fortunately for us, we saw a lot of just transient travel, which is individuals and families traveling, and that's really helped us this summer for sure. And we hope to still see families traveling, but we'll have to look at our operations and see how we need to set up this off season. We've also experienced a lot of challenges in supply chain, everything from equipment to repair, maintenance, to vendor contracts. Window replacement is pushed out multiple months. So we're adjusting to that. Food supply is extremely challenged right now, particularly as it relates to truck drivers. There's a national shortage. So we're seeing a lot of our vendors cut the number of deliveries that they can give to us. So you're going to see some menu adjustments as we try to manage through that process. Otherwise, you know, hopefully we're through this soon and we can start moving in a positive direction for sure. So thank you again for all of your support.
Thank you, Nicole. It was kind of a relief to start to see that parking lot fill up.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Sorry to hear that it's getting softer again. Anybody have any questions for Nicole?
Doug, I do. Nicole, as you know, we do have our annual meeting scheduled for October 30th.
Yes, I saw your email come through.
Right, and so I guess we're just like everyone else, if something comes up and we have to make adjustments, that we will do that. But the AV portion of that for us is going to be real important. So I'll connect with whomever is on the team when they get back.
Yeah, Desi will be your contact and she should be back next week. And we'll partner with our audiovisual services.
Great, thank you very much, Nicole.
Of course.
Steve.
Yeah, hi, Nicole. This is Steve Geisels. How are you?
Good.
Hey, are there any sort of new projects in the future happening at the hotel or the resort?
Yeah, so we're scheduled to do the roof repair fix on the Golf and Country Club's tennis courts and pool. So those roofs, we're still continuing the phased repair of the pier restoration. That's a multi-million-dollar project that ownership is working through. We're starting a 3-phase roof repair at the resort. It's a very large roof here. And then next year we'll start a phased painting at the resort. So painting, we've seen a lot of wear and tear just due to weather. And so we will be starting that hopefully in the spring. We had a whole bunch of outdoor furniture coming, but all of that was delayed and now is scheduled to arrive probably next month when we don't need it. But so that'll be put into storage and waiting for next year. So yeah, I mean, we're working on a potential guest room refresh. So we have 196 hotel rooms that are aged significantly. And so we're working with our ownership group to specifically the bathrooms to do a refresh in that. So we're hopeful for that for next year, hopefully in the first quarter as well.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Nicole.
You bet.
Only other announcement we have is our regular scheduled meeting for October 20 is on October 21st at 4 p.m. And we'll do the same unless rules change. We'll do a hybrid. So part of it will be here, and those who want to will Zoom as well. So next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I take it everybody had a chance to review those. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Doug, I have a question on the minutes.
Let's
On
put the
page-
motion up first, and then we'll discuss the
Okay,
the minutes.
sorry.
All right, and second, Steve Haynes, and Jeff seconded. Okay, and what was the discussion on, Joe?
So at the bottom of page 3 on the minutes, which is page 5 of the document, it says for the last one, in favor 3/unanimous, opposed 5. For obvious reasons, unanimous probably shouldn't be there.
We will make that correction.
Any other corrections to the minutes? John?
Yes, with respect to the note there on that same page, just above the notation that Joe referenced, it says the discussion to have the resolution revised to include an apology to the members involved in the Carnoustie buffers. That wasn't, I don't think that accurately characterizes what I was trying to say. I was trying to reflect the fact that the current ASC believes that the prior approval did not comply with CCNRs and would not have been approved today, and that was an important element. The modification was not approved, but I was not asking for an apology.
So is there some suggestion that we should do, or Debbie, can you get together with John to make sure that that is documented correctly?
Certainly.
Any other corrections to the minutes? All in favor of the corrected minutes? Say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Next is a member open forum. Lori, do we have anyone signed up for open forum?
Yes, we do. That would be Connie Serdick, excuse me.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi there. I have a question for the ASC. I'm curious about the paint colors when people have, when they want to change their house color or, obviously new homes that are looking for paint colors. Now, I've had 3 people come to my house asking about, they wanted to change their paint colors or they were building a house. And they came to my house, and would it be easier if the ASC had a palette of colors and people just could come in and pick some colors that were close to whatever the palette is? Obviously, all the colors here have been approved. So it seems like it's way too much that these people have to go through hoops to figure out, okay, is my paint color gonna work, and having to paint boards and everything, when at the end of the day, everyone here has been approved. Is it possible that we can streamline it somehow? Because I know a lot of people it's very stressful for a lot of people. And it just seems, if there's a way that it could be easier on people, especially people building homes, maybe there's a better way of doing this.
Steve, do you want to respond to that?
I would be delighted to. I'm the chair of the ASC. We do have a palette. It's in the office. It's difficult to reproduce the colors to put it on the web, on a website. You can't be sure that what you're looking at is what you're going to get. Well, it's in the office. It's available whenever the office is open, and someone building a house is informed of that in the process of building. And if anyone who wants to change the color of their house it needs to, there's a simple form to fill out to notify the ASC if you're painting the house, and if you're not changing the color, that's all that's necessary. Changing the color, the palette's in, and you just have to choose a color from the palette. So that exists, and why people aren't taking advantage of it, I don't know, because it's that the form, the requirement to report to the ASC that you're going to paint has been in place for a very long time, and there's a simple form to fill out that will bring you to the palette.
So let me ask a question, Steve. I know that there's talk about being able to place all the standards, all the updated standards and everything on the website. Can those color palettes be posted with the actual brand and color name so that they can look at a color wheel and determine what color is which?
Well, we don't support a single brand. So that's a little bit, that's a problem. Because that would essentially be an endorsement of the brand. The committee accepts colors that look like the colors on the palette. The palette is to give a range of color that is going to be approved by the committee. So I don't know,
So-
we would need to have some assurance that putting a specific brand on the website would not be a violation of some rule or regulation.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Oh, so I guess what I'm asking is, because I know I went through it as well, is that when you pick a color and someone has already has it on their house, and you say, this is the color on this house at this address, and I go, obviously it's already been approved. Why do I have to jump through hoops to go, okay, I gotta fill, like the form I'm fine with, but now I've got to paint a board, send it in, wait. We had to wait, I don't know, for a week or almost 2 weeks, I guess at the time, to be approved when I'm trying to get, everything rolling, and I've got, and it seems ludicrous to me to have to, when it's already on other homes in the area.
Well, the problem is, one, that the approval process in the past has not always been tightly adhered to. And so there are a few houses in the neighborhoods that have colors that are not on the palette and would not be approved. Second, with time, the color wears and changes. So what you see on the house after several years may not be the color that was approved. It's a different shade, it's weathered, it can change. And just as it seems complicated to get your paint color approved, it's complicated when someone complains about the color that was approved. And the way, it's very important that we are equitable in enforcing the rules across the entire community. And we don't have a good way of doing that other than to actually see the color on the material that is going to be applied to, because that can make a difference in how it looks. We also have an obligation from the CCNRs to assure variation of color of homes in neighborhoods. And having the sample to look in the neighborhood and be sure that we're not getting many houses of the same color or very similar colors in a single neighborhood is an important part of our responsibility to enforce the rules that are in the CCNRs. So unfortunately, we don't have a better way than to see the actual paint put on the actual material. And typically a 2-week turnaround, because our meetings are every 2 weeks, is what can be expected.
Thank you. Lori, anyone else?
Yes, next would be Pat Kingshot.
Who is that?
Pat Kingshot.
Oh, Pat, okay.
Thank you, Lori. Hi, everybody. Pat Kingshot on Wood Duck Way, St. Andrews 4. Yesterday, we all experienced a 9.5-hour plus power outage, which has to be the worst in the 16 years that I have lived here, longest to my knowledge. I didn't see anything on the agenda for today, and I don't know if the city has gotten back to you, but I think all of us here would appreciate finding out what happened, what the problem was, and why it took until 11 o'clock yesterday to even determine what the problem was, according to their answering machine message on the power outage number, and then until 12:15 to get it working again. And are we stable, or could it happen again? Thank you.
Debbie, do you want to just respond to Pat on that?
Pat, the limited information that I received was they located a problem near the Horizon development. And I don't have exact details, but we can certainly check in and see to your question of what the reason was and hopefully it's resolved and will not happen again.
But I think that it would be good to put an update on the quick
I agree. I think that's what I'm asking for, Doug, that everybody knows, so it's not rumors and it's not things being passed around. I saw the concentration of trucks over there by the boxes on Horizon or near Horizon Gates. So I suspected that's where it was, but I think we all need to know and get some more information about just what occurred. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Good comment.
point, yeah.
Lori?
I don't have anybody else that has indicated that they wish to speak.
Terrific. Okay. Moving on then, Debbie, do you want to give us your executive director report?
Yes, Doug. First is the agenda should say 2021 voters pamphlet. And Helen may speak to this further under elections. Just a reminder that the staff must have all completed materials no later than the 24th. We would prefer to have them on the 23rd. I think that actually Helen wanted to do a review on the 22nd, but as they say, kind of drop dead date is the 24th. And as a reminder, that packet must be sent to the members via email and USPS by September 30th. And I sent everyone an example of last year's pamphlet, so you know that it's very detailed. And so we're getting some clarification on the requirements in that package. So I just very much appreciate everyone's help in accomplishing that deadline. Thank you. Next is the 2020 audit. And Joe, if I could have you help on this. That report was sent to the board yesterday. And Joe, as the treasurer, would you like to take this?
Certainly.
Thank you.
So effectively, the document that was sent to us was 41 pages long, of which there were a few extraneous pages that didn't have anything to do with the audit. The audit was a report that we just got yesterday, and that's the first time we've received anything, was a clean audit, which means that there were no problems found. There were no problems in the procedures. The staff was made available, and everything that they wanted to do or needed to do in order to verify the accuracy of the numbers for 2020 was provided to them, and it was quote unquote all good.
Perfect, thanks, Joe.
So just to let you know, we engaged them. When I say we engaged Joseph Vandal and Company in March. So they finished this year. Related to the audit, it was, they've given us an invoice, which was exactly identical to what they quoted. So there were no overruns or any extraneous costs, which is great. We had a brief email chat in the last 24 hours. And we asked if we were to do a review next year, because we're only supposed to do an audit by virtue of Washington state law, I believe, every 3 years. They said their procedures for an audit are the same as their procedures for a review. So if we were to select them for next year, then the procedures would be identical. So at the end of the day, the board will have a choice as to whether to do a review or an audit. But if we use Joseph Vandal, it'll be the same. So we may as well conduct an audit.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about the audit for this year and potentially for next year.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Next is the Carnegie bioswale, and we believe there is progress towards settling this issue. And that's all I have to report on that. And then the maintenance report, you were provided in the package. And does the board have any questions? There was the Drayton Hillside Bioswale, the roads, landscape, outsourcing, and the general department. Were there any questions that I can answer on that report?
Steve?
Yes, again, I'd like to request clarification on which Drayton Hillside bioswale is being addressed, or whether both are. So far, we've only heard reports about the Drayton Hillside 2 bioswale, but both bioswales are in the budget. Is there in fact a problem with the Drayton Hillside 1 bioswale?
Bruce, you are on the call, I believe. Could you please address that question? Bruce, if you're on, you may be muted. Okay, Steve, I will get clarification on that and follow up with you. Evidently, Bruce is not on the call.
Yeah, it would just be nice to keep them separate in the reports and.
Understood.
My second question has to do with the the stormwater system. And this is more of a warning than anything else. I'm glad we're looking at the stormwater system. We believe that we're completely responsible for the stormwater system within semi-auto, that the city has no responsibility for that portion of the stormwater system. And so I have three questions. And one is, do we have a complete accounting of all the parts of the system for which we're responsible? My latest information suggests that we have, through the work of the previous construction compliance consultant, a map of the large components, but it's unclear whether we have a complete accounting of everything that we're responsible for. Two, has the system for which we're responsible ever had a comprehensive inspection? It's now, parts of it are now 30 years old.
So should we answer those?
I don't think so. I think this is something going forward that we'll need to take up with the maintenance committee and so on, but we're seeing it at the ASC repeatedly. We are now today being asked to inspect a connection site and a potential area of contamination of the stormwater system from a construction site. And this is stuff that hasn't been part of the committee's responsibilities before, and we're doing it in the absence of a construction compliance consultant. And we need to get our act together as an
Is that a city
association.
requirement or is that?
The city building permit says coordinate with the SRA regarding connections to the stormwater system. Yeah, and they've been pretty clear informally that they take no responsibility for stormwater system inside. That needs to be investigated and straightened out. And then the third question is, has the potential for repair to the stormwater system and anything affected by it, if it fails somewhere, been included in previous reserve studies? And are we properly funded in the reserve fund for the potential of such an event occurring? Well, I have no information on that, but these are pretty important questions that we need to get to.
I would suggest what we do is have Bruce give us an update on the storm sewers, because I know that Leroy is very familiar with our systems here. And I know that they've been out. In fact, just recently I asked a similar question and they went out and they've been going through each of them. They gave me a history of how often they've been cleaned and that they have which ones that they had recently checked. There was a few that they were still to check, and going out and looking at them.
Who's they?
Bruce and Leroy. And so
Yeah,
I think that there's active
sorry.
involvement there, but I think we should have a comprehensive report from Bruce.
Yes. Okay, and if there are no other questions, that's all I have in my report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I
David.
make a comment, please?
Sure.
In the audit package, there were a number of pages that dealt with the previous reserve study, and there is a section in there on stormwater drainage facility maintenance. So it is in there. It's very unclear what information backs up this half a page in the audit report, and I have not seen the prior reserve study, but it seems to be in there.
Thanks, John. Debbie?
Doug, I just realized we need to back up a step. Does the board want to make a motion to accept the audit so that we can get that finalized and get it in the January?
Is there a motion to accept the audit? Joe, would you like to, Steve? Steve Dysels, is there a second? Second. Thank you, Jeff. All in favor? Raise your hand. Any opposition? Okay. That's passed unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, Joe, the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Doug. So in our package from pages 10 to 13 is the usual monthly update of the financials for 2021. So the first page is the operating fund budget from the beginning of 2021 through to the end of August. There was nothing surprising in any of the 21 details on the actuals or in the next couple of pages, except I'll inform you about the reserve study, which is on the last, or sorry, reserve fund estimates on the last page. So page 10 is till the end of August, the plan to the end of August and the actuals to the end of August. You see that we are considerably better than plan, and there are a bunch of reasons down below. On the revenue side, because we got the PPP loan forgiven, and in addition to that, we've got I think 4 more ASC reviews that happened as opposed to what was planned. We've got 11 year to date, according to my count, compared to the plan of 7. From a personnel standpoint, there were personnel in maintenance that have not been here for a couple of months that were in the plan. And the plan way of dealing with the accounting for personnel was a little different than the way it's been recorded for the year. It's more complicated to say why is accounting different, but that's just what it was. Repairs and maintenance, that overage was basically for the gate, the gates, doing the landscaping for all the gates in the month of June, I believe it was. And then professional fees, where we have saved a bunch of money, is mostly due to the accounting fees that were planned. And it's been offset a little bit by Jake Lee stuff and a little bit more for IT. Although IT has not happened as we scheduled it would be, more of the costs I believe are going to happen in the month of August and September that we're being billed for. So that's the month, that's the actuals to the end of August. So we are now 2/3 of the way through the 2021 year. The next page, which is page 11 or page 3 of my package, is the estimate for the year, which is the forecast compared to the plan for the year. We had a plan for the operating fund of being in a deficit of $111,000, and we are currently looking to be about $11,000 in a deficit position. So an improvement of about 100 grand. The reasons are below. The single biggest reason is the PPP loan being forgiven in the amount of about $56,000 or $55,000, sorry. The second biggest reason is the accounting fees that we haven't had to spend for the year. And a myriad, a little of this, a little of that equals 100 grand. So that is page 11. Page 12 is the reserve fund budget. So what I did in this is I made one significant modification, which is last month, I put down $75,000 as an estimate to be spent in 2021 for the Drayton Hillside bioswale. In the plan, it was there was $28,000 forecast to be for stormwater work. I've just assumed that that is going to be the Drayton Hillside bioswale. So instead of 75,000 that I had last month, if you remember at the last town hall, there was a question about whether we were going to spend all $75,000 that was in the budget for 2021. So in conjunction with the finance committee meeting that we had a couple days ago, we went through that and we decided that probably only about a fifth at most would be expended in this year, depending on what we do with the Drayton Hillside bioswales and what the costs are going to be. And if it's similar to what we've encountered with Carnoustie, and at this moment in time, we don't know if it's going to be similar. We have estimated a grand total of 100 grand, as opposed to what I had said last month was 75. But what I have is $20,000 in 2021 and $80,000, which you'll see in a short while, in 2022. That's the only item of significance that was changed between last month's estimate for the year for the reserve fund and this month's. The last page is the balance sheet. And what we have we just did a billing, as most of you know, where most of the money was collected for the second half of 2021 in the month of August. And so at the end of August, we increased our cash balance by about $250,000, $300,000 compared to what we had at the end of July. Other than that, pretty much nothing changed. That is the 2021 financials. Should I make a motion that we accept the 2021 financials as presented? Or I'd like to make a motion that we accept them as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. John Palin?
Thank you.
Any questions on any of the information that you've seen regarding 2021?
Okay, then I'll ask the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That passes.
All right, next, we will move on to the 2022 budget. Sorry, I'm just flipping screens here. So on page 14 or 15 of your package is the first page. We'll actually go to page 14, which is the table of contents, because there's going to be 9 pages of content here. And it's important to walk through because this is the information that is going to be presented for the AGM. It's either in this format or a different format, but the numbers are what we're going to be voting on to bring forward in the package for the AGM. So the first page you're going to see is an entire P&L of 2022, including income items with some detail, and then buckets of spending, and you'll see the line items. And what I've done is I've put down the 2022 numbers as compared to the current view of 2021, which is what you just saw a couple of pages ago. The second page, which is a 2-pager, is expenditures broken down by line item from the general ledger, basically. And these are expenditures for the entire SRA, so operating fund, as compared to 2021. The third page, or the third section, which is also 2 pages, is the same set of details of expenditures as they relate to the administration side of the operating fund only. And you'll see the details. The fourth section, which is also 2 pages, is the set of line items pertaining to only the maintenance fund. The maintenance expenses in the operating fund. The fifth section is a small section which just highlights a couple of items that are included in what we call the SRA building. And you'll see that the main expense there is the interest on the debt. And then the last page, or last section, and the last page are the income and expenditures forecast for the reserve fund. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through some of the assumptions. I'm hoping that you might have had an opportunity to look at this prior to the meeting. So it would take a while to go through all 9 pages of information. So I'll highlight a few things in them that are pertinent. And we went through the numbers for 2022 are the exact same numbers in aggregate as we presented at both town halls in the last month. There are no deviations to the 2022 numbers, because our feeling from those town halls from the residents is they want or need more clarification on what's inside the numbers that are being presented, but we didn't feel that there was any strong pushback or one way or another to increase or decrease anything. So
Hey,
I'll
Joe?
quickly go through pages, if that's okay.
Steve, you had a question?
No, just Joe, in terms of that comment, did we move 80,000 for the Drayton Hillside into 2022?
Sorry, I should have said that is the only number on the reserve fund. What I meant a minute ago, and I should have clarified, on the operating fund,
Got it.
there have been
Okay.
no changes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that question. So I'll quickly go through. So I'm currently on page 15 of the package, which is page 2 of the 2022 numbers. So in the revenue assessments of $841,000, that represents a 4% increase in dues from what we are currently paying per unit. You'll see some numbers in light blue. So for the architectural review fees in 2021, it's estimated there's going to be 15 of them at $3,000 a pop. In 2022, we have no way to estimate or guess or with some degree of certainty how much is going to be done. But what we do know, of course, the more houses that are built on, the less lots there are made available to build on in the future. So what I've done is said, if there's 15 in 2021, I'm estimating there's going to be 1 per month or 12 in total for 2022. That's a little bit of a decrease in revenues. On the transfer fees, we're estimating that there's going to be 122 sales that happened in 2021. And so I'm estimating, and this from my knowledge of being here for 15 years, I believe that this has got to be the highest volume of sales that have occurred within our community from my memory, certainly in the last 10 years. I'm not anticipating, I could be wrong, that we're going to have as many transfers. So instead of having approximately 10 a month in 2021, I'm estimating there's going to be about 8 a month in 2022, and that's the number 96. So the expenditures for 2022, they're all broken down by category. You will have all seen these numbers because they were all at the 2 town halls. And I will go into detail about how they break down between maintenance and administration and also the SRA building in the next couple of pages. Any questions on this page regarding the overall P&L for 2022? You can see that with an estimated surplus, given these numbers of $1,000, these are all in thousands of dollars, the 4% increase in dues is what I termed at the town hall a break even. Here's the definition, or here's the example of the break even. Any questions on this one page, the overall P&L for 2021 as compared to 2022? Okay, if you're okay, then I'll move on to the next couple of pages. So the next couple of pages, 16 and 17 of the package are all, and frankly for the rest of the package, are all related to expenditures. This first section is a breakdown of the total expenses of $959,000 in 2021 compared to $914,000 in 2022. Once again, these numbers are all thousands of dollars. It's easier to see the numbers if they're not broken down into units. It's a lot easier to see them in thousands. So it's broken down by category: personnel, community administration, ASC, etc., all the way down, which is how the general ledger groups all these numbers and how we book them, or how they're all booked. Are there any questions in the breakdowns of the 959 in 2021, 914 in 2022? The first set of numbers on page 16 is exactly the numbers that were in the town hall slide for the showing the numbers about spend in the community for each year. So you'll have seen that, those set of buckets in the last few weeks. Any questions?
So, I know that we all know that forecasting the budget for next year is an art and not a science. And we have good reason to believe that the personnel expenses and the expenses for advisory services, the ASC, next year will be larger than these numbers. And so I'm wondering if personnel changes that we know about are taken into account, or is the total number, which is, as you know, hard to estimate, but somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 probably, based on what we do know now, is that immaterial to the size of this budget?
Would you like me to answer that, Steve, or to give it a shot?
Yeah.
So in 2021, going back to the revenue, we had, we're estimating there'll be a total of 15 ASC. Your question is directly about the ASC, right? Or is it about other than the ASC?
No, it's about the personnel, the construction compliance consultant primarily, and other expenses that we're anticipating. For instance, the need for a survey of certain parts of properties in order to administer the rules of the in the CCNRs appropriately, and quite likely the possibility of stormwater consultant fees. So we're trying to get estimates, but we don't have estimates. But we can imagine tens of thousands of dollars more expense in 2022.
Your point is very valid. If we are going to need a series of specialists to be surveying or doing a bunch of work or ascertaining engineer reports, etc., there is a significant chance that we will need to spend more money than we've currently got in our budget, because those types of specific items were not accounted for or budgeted for at this moment in time.
That would be in professional fees, right, Joe?
It would generally be in professional fees, yes. And there are very few professional fees that we have listed under the maintenance category.
And
if those are applying to maintenance or whatever in our community. Our general maintenance fees are accounting, legal, HR, and the types of things that we're used to so far. If we're going to go and do a bunch of surveying and other types of things, which in an aging community is very likely at some point in time, that is a risk that we don't currently have that in the budget.
Do you have confidence that we have the management flexibility to handle this?
Now, is your question targeted in such a way that if we were to need them or include them, that we would be able to break even, or that we might have savings in other areas? Is that your question, or do you think you mean something slightly different than that?
No, that's exactly. Do we have the flexibility to handle that kind of change? Or do we need to build in some kind of uncertainty factor to the budget?
You know, Steve, it's a very good question. And at the end of the day, if the community needs them, because it's something we need to do in order to, I'll just say, use the term, prevent things from occurring rather than deal with them after the fact that they've occurred. And so we need to do surveying, we need to do other types of engineering reports or reviews. Then perhaps we should bake it in, and it has not been baked in so far. Can we handle it? There's always an ability to handle it without any kind of special assessment. Should we? That's a different question that I don't know that this board has addressed at any point in time so far.
I guess the challenge I see with it is, it sounds like we have no real approximate estimate as to what it could be. You said it could be 20, could be 40.
Yeah, I mean, these things have come up recently, and it just, the efforts are being made to get those estimates, and they just haven't happened yet.
Yeah, so I guess the blunt answer is no, we don't have those types of things incorporated in 2022 budget. And frankly, we don't have those types of things incorporated in the 2021 budget. If they're needed, then we need them. If that's just the way it goes. And I guess we still have an opportunity over the next week, because to the point from Debbie a little earlier, we have to have all the information in for the AGM within about a week from now. We could put in some estimates regarding engineering and surveying and that kind of stuff within the community that'll cost X. And if we put that in, we could still balance the budget. I don't know that there is many areas or any areas to save in at this moment in time in 2022, but we could put them in, and then we might need to move the rate up by, we've got 4% right now, so maybe it'll need to go to 5 or possibly even 6.
So, Joe, let me just ask a question here. In thinking about the resolutions that are before the board, as we move forward with those resolutions, are these kinds of questions going to become real challenges for the board to deal with?
I don't believe so. Should we do a little bit of a precursor to the resolutions? So the resolution on unbudgeted spending, if you're okay with chatting about it a little bit right now, anything up until $50,000, the board, if we need to do some things like what we're talking about, the board merely needs to inform the community that we need to spend unbudgeted amounts on these types of activities that the board believes is essential for the community. So up to 50 grand. Once you hit the threshold of 50 grand in that resolution, then it will need to go to a vote of the community through an election runner, not an AGM or anything like that, but just through an election runner type of vote at that point in time within a couple of weeks. But up to 50 grand for individual types of things like what you're talking about, it would be fine. It's a notification.
Yeah, and Steve, are the anticipated unbudgeted items right now going to fit within that $50,000?
Or will exceed?
Well, probably, but the estimates aren't in, and they depend, in the case of the construction compliance consultant, if Joe's right, and we have fewer things for that person to do next year, sure, we'll be okay. If the increase in interest in buying up here goes up, no, it probably goes over that. So the point is that the budget is a planning tool, and it changes. Things change, and they change in unexpected ways. And I'm just wondering if we, even under current circumstances, have the flexibility to handle those.
So would it be possible to add under professional fees, something like a contingency services or professional fees, and then somehow balance still the numbers on it? Joe?
Patricia, is that targeted to me or is that targeted to
to
somebody
you.
else? At the end of the day, the board can ask and approve to add anything into the budget for any kinds of things that they believe are likely to occur in a particular year. So the simple answer is yes.
The reason why I would like at least to show something in there is for the members and the rest of the people see a number that is somehow accounted for for the next year. Something that if there is an increase of a consultant or something that needs to be taken care of, they said, okay, there was a number already in there that we know we're able to manage and handle. Something else, well, it's going to go beyond that, but if they see something, oh, okay, their previous, just an example, $50,000 in expenses that they are probably going to use it, but probably not, but it will be nice probably for them to see that there's no assurance that we can afford or manage or handle that expense if it ever happens.
Steve?
Yeah, I think we need to have a better handle on what might occur, right? So we have another week to get some degree of accuracy if we're going to have an expense in that line or not. I think right now, just throwing a number in because maybe sort of kind of, to me, that's not proper accounting.
John?
Thank you, Doug. Right or wrong, it's been my impression that basically the ASC has been more or less self-supporting. And if I understand Steve's concerns correctly, it's sort of variable cost that depends on the level of activity that might occur in the next year. That may be an oversimplification, but shouldn't we as a board take the approach that new construction and remodels and so forth are basically, they pay for the services that ASC must provide to accomplish those things? You know, general community enforcement, I see as a general responsibility that the entire community should pay for. But for project specific work done by the ASC, it seems to me that the fees we charge should be self-sustaining.
We completely agree. And the fees are going to be looked at when we have the numbers for the personnel figured out. We need a little guidance from the board on what to include in that number. But that'll come up in my report. Those things should be budget neutral. Absolutely. But they could result in a change in these numbers that exceed the numbers that Joe was talking about in the resolutions to be considered in the future.
But Steve, to that point, wouldn't it be sort of a net neutral? So we would be talking about an increase in revenues.
Yes, and I have language to amend the resolution that will include that, but it's not in the resolution now.
Great.
Yes, what we've contemplated as the finance committee anyways, is if there are going to be increased costs in a specific area, and the ASC is one of those specific areas, and there are going to be increased revenues associated with those costs, directly associated, that should be, as to your term, Steve, net neutral or even net positive. So we're talking a little bit about the ASC. So one thing I wanted to bring to your attention, Steve Haynes, specifically, since you're the ASC guy, one thing you'll notice is that the revenues for the ASC new starts in 2021 were 45 grand, and the direct expenses associated with it are estimated to be 30. In 2022, I lowered the amount of revenues associated with the ASC. Instead of 15 of them, I have 12, so 36,000. But because you know, and I know, that the CCC costs are likely going to be higher, I did not change the amount of costs associated with the ASC. I kept them at 30 grand as well, which if you look at it, for 12 starts or 12 submissions, that equals 2,500. If you look at 2021, of 15 starts, it's 2,000. So I don't know if that's going to be exactly where it ends up, but I have increased the amount of cost per start in the ASC at this moment in time in 2022. And I know we have some work to do to find out, and none of this contemplates an increase in revenues for each start, nor does it contemplate whether there's going to be somebody else doing it or what the amount is that we're going to pay or not. So we don't know about the net neutral, whether it's going to be anything different, but I don't expect that any of the ASC stuff is going to have an impact on the resolution that's being brought forward a little bit later on in this meeting. Are there any other questions from Steve Haynes or anybody else regarding the overall budget? So the entire SRA, before I go into the administration side and the maintenance side?
Proceed.
Okay, so page 18 of the package, which is page 5 of my 2022 budget. So the numbers at the top of that page are exactly the numbers that you would have seen in the town hall presentation, presented exactly this way. So the numbers down below are the breakdowns on a line item basis on the administration side of our business. It's just how it's composed. On an overall basis, you can see that administrative spending in total is going from 537 to 454, which is a decrease pretty close to $80,000. And if you want to sum it up, everybody probably in this call knows it is basically Joint Partners is not with us anymore, and they were about just over $80,000 in 2021. So eliminating them, we come close to very much equaling year over year. Any questions on the administration side of the budget?
One, Joe. The
Yes.
health insurance cost seems to be going up dramatically. Is that due more to increased rates or to staff count?
Both. So what we've brought forward as a desire in 2022 is that our current part-time administration person, which is Justine, will be brought on to full-time employment. And when as it comes on to full-time employment, she will then be eligible for health benefits. She doesn't get them now. So that will be, one more person instead of 3, it'll be 4. So that's just a numbers game. And then, as always, as all of you know, health costs generally increase. So I believe I increased the price per month, which we're currently paying, if I remember right, we're paying about $800 and something a month. I've estimated that it's going to go up by about 10% next year. We have no idea. The health plan comes due in June. So it's just based on an estimate. So both of the things that you brought up, John.
So if rates still go up by 10%, that would really only have a 5% effect for fiscal 22, correct? Since
Not
it's 6
really,
months of-
because they were lower in the first half of 2021. So if the first half of 2021 was lower, in fact, it was quite a bit lower because we had a less extensive health plan from, I believe it was January through March. If you need to, Debbie, you can clarify, but I believe it was January through March. And from June through the end of the year we're in, it became 100% covered. Whereas next year, it'll be for full coverage for the whole year with increased costs.
Okay.
So it's not
Thank
a 5% because it wasn't the same costs all year, John. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Question for Debbie. Debbie, the increase in coverage that Tiffany has recently mentioned to you about, is that all included in here? Or is it actually an increase in our costs?
That's an employee, I'm saying it's employee cost.
Okay.
Doug, is that a question that affected the budget, or is that a different question I'm just not aware of?
That was just a question of whether it was something that would affect the budget if it was accounted for, so.
Okay, all right,
Doesn't affect the budget.
okay. So if there's no more questions on the administration side of our business, I will move on to the next couple of pages, which are maintenance. So the first little section, which is 4 items personnel, that was exactly the set of numbers and the presentation that you and everybody who attended the town hall would have seen as well. So those are the top level numbers in the big buckets. The one thing you'll see about maintenance, so where it says % of annual total spending, you'll see in 2021, we were targeting for about 38% of total spending being oriented towards maintenance. In 2022, with the slight increase of about $50,000 roughly, I think it's 46 or something, it's equal to 45% of the total number, and that is in line with the board wanting our community to be more focused on the maintenance side of our business and beautifying the community a little bit more, rather than on the administration side of the business, which is where joint partners was generally focusing, which was the main increase. In the numbers down below on the maintenance side are the breakdowns by line item. I think John has presented to all of us the $170,000. So here's how it's broken down. Are there any questions? There's no new information in here from the past. Are there any questions on what's in the maintenance budget for 2021 or 2022? All right. The last page that we've got for operational spending is basically, it's called the SRA building, which is how the joint partner consulting broke down some of the expenses associated. The main one is related to the interest expense on the current mortgage. And of course, if we're going to get a lower rate, a slightly lower rate, and the mortgage as it's being paid down, expecting it to be paying less in 2022 than 2021. The other expense of any significance, although it's trivial, is real estate taxes on the building or property taxes. Now, interestingly, there was a comment that was sent to Debbie, who forwarded it to me about a week or a week and a half ago, I believe, that suggested from our auditor that because we, the SRA, effectively, something like, do not own our building, but rather it is jointly owned by a lot of different people in the community, or they contribute dues and that's how it's paid. So it seems interesting to me. His thought, or his office's thought, was that we might not have to pay property taxes on the building at all. Now, Debbie, did you represent, or did I represent that correctly, or did I represent it maybe a little bit incorrectly?
That was my basic understanding as well, Joe.
So we've got another real estate payment, just like all of you do on your own home, that's due by, I believe it's the end of October. We're going to ask the question to him or his staff, what did that mean? And if we don't pay, is that acceptable or not acceptable? It's not acceptable not to pay a bill that comes your way. But we would need to get clarification about what exactly does that mean? And does that mean that they could revise their property tax statement so that in some way, shape, or form, if what he says is, or their office says is true, we might get a refund at a later date, which might mean we don't have to pay anything in 2022. This is all new to me. I've never heard of anything like that. If there was no clarification in the email, it's just like, oh, you guys are a group owned not by the community, but by dues that are coming in from residents, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe there's an opportunity to basically save a bit of money, and coincidentally or not, that would actually save the amount of money that we paid on the audit. Who knows? But that's just something I thought I'd let you know that we're going to look into and see if it actually comes true, because it's not necessarily about this year. It's about every other year going forward, if that's the case. Anyways, so that's just anything in the SRA building, which is trivial at the end of the day. It only represents about 5% of total spending. Anything in there, which is a question or anything like that? All right. We'll take that as okay. The last one is the reserve budget. To Steve Geisel's question, did we add a different amount of money into the 2022 plan, like the 80,000 that I mentioned earlier? And the answer is yes, I did. So we have no idea at this moment in time how much it'll be to repair, hopefully not replace, the Drayton Hillside bioswales. But in the essence of, so on the finance committee, we believe that we need to represent an estimate of what the whole thing could cost. And if it's representative of what the whole cost of Carnoustie could be, including the amount of money that they provided us a couple of months ago to put in trust, which we have in trust, that was close to 100 grand or in the vicinity of 100 grand. So for Drayton Hillside bioswales, we just, at this moment in time, because we got no other knowledge, put the same amount of money. All the other payments or costs in here, you've seen before because they were in the town halls. Any question on the reserve fund budget for 2022 or 2021? 2021, you already saw in my last presentation.
Joe, is the $80,000 for Drayton Hillside 2, is that a guess or is that an estimate that Bruce has generated?
Bruce has not, in the maintenance report that was just provided to us, which is not much different than what was provided in prior months, he just said we're looking at it. It is purely a guess. And the finance committee looked at it and said, let's just put down in aggregate, so the same as what we think it could be for the Carnoustie one if we had to replace the whole thing, which we have said over the last couple of months, it could be as much as 100 grand.
So Bruce, can you weigh in on that discussion just a little bit?
Bruce wasn't on the call earlier. Is he on the call now?
Yeah.
Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay. Right now, it looks like there's no major repair based on the report and the discussion. It's more of a maintenance issue. Make it real simple, scraping off the top, getting rid of the decayed vegetation, and then replacing that top. It's not going to be a full replacement of the bioswale.
So Bruce, sorry, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So I know in the Carnoustie one, they did, you know, what I heard the term 100-year rainfall or something like, in other words, taking tons of water from a fire hydrant and throwing it down the Carnoustie bioswale to see what happens with the water. Has something similar or anything vaguely similar happened for the Drayton Hillside ones to get a pretty good idea that it's only some basic maintenance done and not anything like could be with Carnoustie?
Joe, the answer is no, there hasn't been anything like that. We did have a certified inspector come in and look at it, and the report you saw was the result. He said it was in poor condition. That essentially is that I'm going to make it real simple again. The top portion of it needs to be replaced, cleaned up and replaced, and then replanted. That's the scope of it.
Okay, so it's based on what you're saying, then it feels like, and I'm just going to use that terminology, it feels like when it's not going to be anything near the same amount of money or condition or risk as happened with, or is currently in process with Carnoustie. Would it be, I certainly don't know much about bioswales and maintaining bioswales and testing them, et cetera, but would it be wise to run a bunch of water down and see where it exits and see if it's going where it's supposed to? And that's one of the ways we were able to find out with Carnoustie that we got a big problem because the water isn't going where it's supposed to.
Just Joe, I'm looking at what you just asked in my mind, looking at the stormwater system doing that. I don't know if we really would get a good result of that based on the fact that we've had it inspected. What I would like to do though, is I'm gonna push real hard on the contractor. Asked for a budgetary quote on what the repair, let me call it maintenance, it's not repairs, what the maintenance will cost on that. And I will do everything in my power to get it to you the first part of next week.
Okay, and all I'm trying to do for the board is represent what the potential costs are going to be. And obviously, if it's just a pure maintenance thing, it's going to be incorporated in the operating budget, and there will be hopefully zero that we have to incorporate in the 2021 or 2022 budgets.
Yeah,
Got
so Bruce, quickly on that, so if it's this, more this cleanup type of thing that you were describing and planting the new vegetation, things like that, is that something that would be done in a span of 1 week, 2 months, 6 months? What type of time frame would that be? Would that be something that would be done before the end of the calendar year 2021?
Actually, not before the end of the calendar year. And talking again with this contractor, I've asked to give a budgetary quote on it. He's indicating that he's pretty much worked out. And if it starts getting muddy, we're gonna have problems accessing that during the rain. It's gonna need to happen during a drier season. Does that help?
Okay, so it's a 2022 dry season type of, it's just from a budgetary standpoint, because we've got some money budgeted for, or at least contingent entry here for 20,000 for 2021.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable better, I think, saying we should budget for it in 2022. Again, all the indications I've got from this one person is that going in there at this time of the year with heavy rains is going to be a messy job.
Okay, then I will take it as an action item, that as I recalculate or redo the set of numbers, I will not have anything in 2021 related to repairing the Drayton Hillside bioswales. I will put something in 2022, and hopefully in the next couple of days before we actually finish the AGM package preparation, I can insert a number related to the that particular item in 2022 that is going to be something different than the 100 grand in total. Does that resonate with the board?
Yeah,
I think
makes
so.
sense.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yep.
Thank you for that information, Bruce, most appreciated. So I believe that I have gone through all of the information in the 2022 potential or draft or whatever you might want to call it plan. So other than as the comment on the Drayton Hillside numbers that are going to be removed from 2021 and put in 2022 only, are there any other things that might need to be adjusted? I know there was conversation on maybe more consultants regarding surveying and engineers, et cetera, but I'm not sure if that sort of went away at this moment in time. Is there anything else that you think should be added to or changed or just adjusted to the 2022 budget / plan that we need to go forward with?
Steve, I have a question on the reserve fund. The budgeted increase in contribution to the reserve fund is how much?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's a very good question. Included in that, which is exactly what I had in the town hall, is an increase from $25 per unit to $40 per unit. So when I use the term, it's an increase of 60%. People generally, what? We can't do anything 60%, but we're only increasing it from $25 to $40 per unit. If we look at the entire aggregation of approximately 4% for the operating fund and 60% or $15 per unit for the reserve fund, that would be a total increase of about 9% for next year to fund both the reserve and the operating funds, basically operating to a balanced budget when you consider that the Drayton Hillside amounts are effectively going to go away or become very little, we hope.
Steve?
So Joe, is it possible, if Bruce comes back to you early next week and says, talk to the contractor, we're looking at $15,000, $20,000 to clean it up. Is it then possible to revisit then the dues and bring those down? Because I think members of the community would appreciate it.
So right now in the reserve, the simple answer is yes, it'll be revisited. But right now, if you look at that page, you'll notice that in 2022, including the 80 grand, it has a deficit of 74 grand. So which would imply, or you don't have to, it doesn't imply anything. It states that we would need to, if we save the 80 and added 15, in other words, save 65, we would still be in a very slight deficit position of somewhere around 10.
Got it.
So yes, it would be a much better presentation to the plan. So if you remember, so the reserve fund for 2021 was forecast to be a massive deficit. So even if we have some exposure on these two bioswales and it feels like Drayton Hillside is going to go away, so that'll be a savings of 20. So even if Carnoustie, we have to spend a bunch of money, and I know none of us, no one in the community, none of us think it's appropriate that we should be targeting the obligations of that neighborhood and the ownership of that neighborhood, the declarant, I believe. We will hopefully be running close to a break even, as opposed to a massive deficit in the plan for the reserve fund that we were stuck with after the last AGM.
Thank you.
Steve Haynes, did you have a?
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna ask the opposite question, given the fact that we've had discussions throughout the year about the likelihood that the reserve fund is underfunded. And we're taking action to have a more detailed reserve fund study done and to take all of those things into account and find out what we really, where we really should be. Do we really have any doubt that it's going to have to go up? And is this enough of an increase this year, or do we just want to wait until we have all that work done and then look at a potentially very substantial increase next year?
So Steve, may I answer, or at least give an attempt to answer Steve's question? That's all it'll be, is just an attempt. Currently, if you look at the audit, the auditors are assuming that all money in the bank is in the reserve fund at the end of the year. They're just basically zeroing out the operating fund. So the money that we had at the end of the year was, and is forecast to be at the end of this year, in excess of $800,000. So that is cash in the bank for the reserve fund currently. Now, as we've had a number of discussions over the last number of months, if we had a mile of road that we had to pave, we wouldn't be able to pave a full mile of road with less than $1 million, as if we had to dig it up. But the roads aren't too bad, so there's not much necessary at this moment in time based on feedback that we've received in the near term. The one thing I need the board to remember / understand is there is equity in the building site. Speculation as to how much, I don't even know. I don't know. We could maybe have someone come over and estimate what it's worth, what we can get for it if we were to sell. I'm not interested in that at this moment in time. But the debt on the building is approximately $700,000. The estimate of the land and the building, I'm suggesting, is more than $1 million, given where we are with real estate these days, perhaps pushing on towards a 1.25, whatever it is speculation on lots of people's part at this moment in time. The reserve fund owns the equity in the building and the land that we have. So don't just think of, we have 800 grand in the bank for the reserve fund. We also have the equity relating to the building and land. And that's important because the amount is fairly substantial. Whatever it is, it's fairly substantial.
Well, I think the other thing too about the reserves, reserve balances that we have is as we start thinking about our reserve study next year, with our focus on maintenance, I think what we do is we make sure that we get our smart real estate folks together in a room with our reserve fund folks and start building that 10-year plan that we've got so that we understand that they've done a good job in doing that planning rather than just kind of filling in the blanks and running. And if we do that, then we have a really good tool to be able to assess our reserves and where we are with the reserves. Until we do that, it's just who knows. So that's what I suggest that we do right after the first of the year, so that we have that reserve fund, that reserve study completed before we get to a budgeting cycle.
And one of the main reasons why we didn't do a reserve study this year is because last year's, although it was supposed to be a comprehensive one, all of us as residents and or the board at that time looked at it and said, well, garbage or input that isn't accurate input going into a set of calculations will never provide a good set of responses coming out the back end. And so when we have less than $100,000 per mile of road being input, and we all know based on even last year, because we did less than 1/10 of a mile in Boundary Ridge that cost over 100 grand, we know that that's not accurate information. So with all the stuff that's been going on for this year, lots of board activity, lots of other things, getting around to do re-estimates of the inputs going into the reserves wasn't able to be completed at this moment in time. But we are going to do a comprehensive one. I'm telling this if Dave Whitmore and other people in the residents are on the call. We are going to do a comprehensive one after we look at real estimates for replacements for all infrastructure in our community that we can identify sometime early in the new year when it settles down a little bit.
So is there a motion to accept this budget?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the 2022 budget as presented, accepting the information that we're going to change on the Drayton Hillside bioswales.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, John. Is there any further discussion we need to have on the budget?
Steve Haynes, do you think you'll, in the next week, you could get more information about, the potential expenses you were talking about so we can get some accuracy there?
Well, we hope. We hope. And there's an issue about what expenses need to be covered by the fees that we need to resolve. And it really should, I think Joe and I would like board advice about whether the submittal fees should cover the total salary and benefits and overhead of both the administrator and the construction compliance consultant, or only the portion of the administrator's time that is devoted to new construction submittals, which is estimated now somewhere between 30 and 50%.
So as it relates to the budget, is that more of a philosophical and a decision that gets made in an operational sense, or is that something that we need to stand back and think about from a budgeting perspective?
Budget.
Well, my concern about putting everything into it is that in general, fees and fines from homeowners association need to be justifiable based on the actual cost of the problem. And if we put 2/3 of activity, the admin, that isn't directly related to new construction into that cost, if someone challenged our submittal fee, we could have a problem. But that's just me. I mean, that's just me interpreting the rule. So that's a decision that the organization needs to make.
Yeah, Steve Haynes and I have been going back and forth on this with various scenarios over the last few months, probably, since June or so. And it's how much of the administration or administrator, the staff person, should be included in the calculations for new houses, or just remodels, new houses, etc. We know that the CCC, construction compliance consultant, who's likely going to cost somewhere in the vicinity of 50 to 125% more than the current CCC is charging, because he's been way under market and we're looking at a market price now. So we know that the input costs are going to be higher, which could drive up the current $3,000 charge that we've got for each individual house or new house start at this moment in time. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to come up with a basis for how the current $3,000 charge was administered. I think I'm paraphrasing Debbie when she answered us. It's just sort of gone up because the board thought we needed to collect more money. And it started at $100 many years ago and is now at $3,000. So Steve Haynes and I both agree, we're coming from different perspectives, that we need to have a basis of calculation for justifying whatever the number is that is going to be charged in the future, so that if the future boards look at that basis of calculations, they can see, okay, well, here's how you slot in this number, you slot in this number of hours, you slot in the blah, 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 and you come up with a new number. And so at least it's a basis that can be discussed. If we don't have a basis to discuss, which feels like we're at right now, it's hard to come up with a number. And that's where we'll need board input, but I think that this needs to be sometime in the near future. Not right now, but sometime in the near future. Will it affect 2022? Absolutely it will, but we don't know how much.
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this is an issue that we can correct before our budget goes to print, correct?
As long as we're assured that we have the flexibility to make those changes and be able to carry out our duties, our required duties to the community, then that's fine.
Steve Haynes as treasurer, and I'm one of the ones who is a stick in the mud. That won't be a problem. Based on the information that we've been going about right now, that will not be a problem at all.
Any further discussion about the budget? Okay, then I'll ask for the question. All in favor of accepting this budget, raise your hand. And it doesn't look like there's any opposition.
And the motion was to adjust the Drayton Hillside numbers in the budget on the reserve fund. So that is the only item that's going to be adjusted at this moment in time.
Great, thank you, Joe. I know I thank everybody for the work that's gone in on that budget. I mean, it's just almost involved everybody and all of our committee members, and so it's a lot of work. And I think that we've got a plan that's been reviewed by the community. We've seen really no opposition, so I'm going to think that our election at the AGM should go reasonably smoothly. All right, next on the agenda is our treasurer's report.
All right, so the first thing, and it's just informational only, is I included the minutes of our August the 10th meeting. So I think the way most committees work is that we have a meeting, we do minutes, it's approved at the next meeting. So by default, it's always going to be a month delayed from when the board gets the meetings for the committee meetings. Is that generally the way everybody worked? Because that's the way we worked.
Yes.
Okay, so that's just, we did have another meeting a few days ago, but we haven't wrapped it up. We haven't looked at the minutes, etc. So continuing on. So the next thing that I have is the Finance Committee position regarding the current 22 SRA budget. So the one thing in having a chat about the budget, which was also the topic of, I'm not going to use the term concern, but discussion that happened at the town halls. We believe as a group that there's not enough information about the scope of what is going to be done within the community for the externally sourced stuff, mainly on the maintenance side of the business. So since there's no scope, but there's only a bunch of numbers, the feeling was that we as a group do not support the contents of the 22 SRA budget in aggregate. We know that's just our position. I just thought I'd let you know, and you're going to see those minutes coming up, that's the way we believe. That doesn't mean it doesn't go forward. That just means we would have liked to have seen more scope about exactly what is going to be covered within the community, especially on the $170,000 of maintenance. So I'll just say that's it. So the last two under the Finance Committee are two resolutions that we brought forward last month. And I'm thinking I put it down under finance because they were finance resolutions. Doug, would you prefer to have a discussion about them under governance?
Well, I think we've got 4 resolutions that have been proposed, correct?
There are 4, of which 2 of them were finance. Do you want to deal with all 4 of them in the governance section?
Yeah, let's do that under governance. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, it could be done here or there.
It really doesn't matter. We can do it now if you want to.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just address these because they're financial ones. So the first one, not in any particular order, the first one that I put down is authorization limits regarding unbudgeted spending. So a couple of hours before the meeting, Doug sent them out to all board members. I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to look at them or not, but the 2 resolutions that were that Doug put out to the board were at exactly as what the Finance Committee 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and then in subsequent emails agreed was appropriate. So we have absolutely no discussions or changes to those resolutions that Doug has brought forward to the board as agreed to, I'm assuming, by the governance committee. The one thing we changed of significance at the top of each of those 2 resolutions, it says the original text said member resolution. What we thought would be appropriate, because we know it came from board members, myself and the governance committee, of which a number of you are on it, we thought it might be better to call it a board resolution, because then the board shows that they want these resolutions to come forward if the board supports it. And it'll be a slam dunk, easy one for the community to accept, knowing that the board thinks that, yes, we need to place these resolutions in order to check us in what we're doing going forward regarding debt as well as unbudgeted spending. I'm doing a grandiose statement right there. But all I wanted to say is those 2 resolutions that we see are, the Finance Committee is perfect with them. We brought them forward and we're perfect with them right now. I know you changed the amounts. We're perfectly fine with those amounts. Is there, so what's the process I should do? Should I ask about looking for approval from the board to bring it to the AGM, each one separately, and then there's any discussion or vote on it, or how should we do this?
Well, it would seem to me what the Finance Committee has asked is that the board accept this resolution. So I'm assuming that what the board does, accept this resolution for it to go before the community.
Correct.
So there should be a motion for that to occur.
Okay.
So is there a motion?
I would like to make a motion to accept the resolution on the unbudgeted spending.
And John, was that a second?
I will second, yes.
Okay, let's open for discussion. Steve?
Well, I'd like to propose a small amendment based on the previous conversations we've had. Because the first paragraph says the preceding restriction will not apply to financial commitment where there is related offset of savings. So that the actual costs are in particular equal to or less, but it doesn't talk about additional income. So I would suggest that after savings, we add the words or new additional income, and that further on in the sentence after the word actual costs, actual and followed by costs, we say actual net costs have or are projected to equal to or less than the approved budget. That will handle explicitly the situation where a change is made, but it's paid for. And without those words, this would restrict us from doing it, would not allow us to do it.
So is that a motion for an amendment?
That is a motion for amendment.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Let's
Joe Sothi, sorry.
Let's discuss the amendment then in the context of the rest of the. Is there any further discussion about Steve's amendment? Joe?
From my perspective as the finance committee, that is perfectly fine. In any kind of amendment, if there are direct revenues associated with spending, then there could be other things. It could be we have fines which we need to recover. If we're going to recover them, those are perfectly fine. As Steve Geisel said earlier in the meeting, a term net neutral, perfectly fine, and that makes tons of sense.
Okay, so any further discussion on the amendment? All right, I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand so we can see. Any opposition? Okay, the amendment is, so let's talk about the rest of the overall resolution. Any discussion about this resolution? Steve, guys,
Yeah, I noticed it was changed from 40 to 50. Was that, where did that come from? Did that come from the governance
Correct.
committee?
Correct.
Okay, great.
And the finance committee is okay with that. For perspective, at this moment in time, from an operating budget perspective, that's just barely over 5% of the total budget, which is fine from us.
I'm fine with this.
Any further discussion on this resolution? All right, I'll ask the question. All in favor of the board supporting this resolution as it goes out to the community, raise your hand. Any opposition? Note that there's two in opposition. Okay.
All right, so the next one is the debt one. I'd like to make a motion to accept the debt resolution as presented to the board.
I'll second.
Thanks, John. Is there discussion on this? Steve?
Two concerns. The first is that at the end of this resolution, which is an addition to the CCNRs, there's a paragraph that is an amendment to a different section of the CCNRs. I think that that's not appropriate form, but that really should be a separate action. It's convoluted, and you end up with a section of the CCNRs that talks about making an amendment, and then it just doesn't look like proper form. It'll make the document confusing in the future. And I think that should be separated and done
And it should probably be noted as well as that last sentence, or that last paragraph there, that change to section 5.02 what had been dropped by the governance committee.
And my second question is whether, because I don't think it's clear in that statement, whether it is clear to everyone that there are obligations assigned to the SRA for the maintenance of certain parts of neighborhood HOAs. They're assigned by the plat or deed, or by CCNR, or by prior amendments to CCNRs that have taken NHOA property and made the SRA responsible for it. I assume that those are grandfathered, but it doesn't say that. And if it's not clear, that's the potential for conflict and even litigation.
I know that was our big concern at the governance committee is that being able to enforce our role in the CCNRs and the various neighborhood CCNRs.
I'm not sure I understand what was being said or how it was being said. May I ask you to repeat or maybe clarify what you mean by your last couple of statements, either Steve or Doug?
And could I add, if you could use an example, if you have one, that would be helpful to me.
Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Well, it's just a question of whether existing obligations of the SRA to maintain property within neighborhood HOAs will be honored going forward, or whether this is an attempt to undo those existing obligations. So there's a driveway, the Puffin Place, the road along inside Puffin Place, along all the houses and lots, was originally in their CCNR stated to be the responsibility of homeowners. There's an amendment, I think it's 2006, that changes that and makes that road the responsibility of the SRA. Will that responsibility disappear as a result of this change, or will that one remain because it already exists at the time of the amendment?
Joe.
So the reason I'm hesitating right now, I know I need to respond or ask something, but if there's responsibilities that are in the CCNRs for maintaining land within the community that exists with the SRA, wouldn't that always continue to be the case? I don't know what a debt addition without asking the community. I'm having a hard time, maybe because I'm just clueless. I don't know how or why that would somehow not allow us to get debt or ask the community for debt. Maybe I'm just naive in this. I'm not sure.
The restriction includes the assumption of any liability, which is the obligation and responsibility of any HOA. I mean, there's a lot of any's in here, and I think it would need to be explicit that existing obligations are not touched by this amendment.
Isn't the liability debt? Isn't that what they're talking about?
That's what we as the finance committee are talking about, not responsibilities or anything within the community. Because if we have, let's just use an arbitrary, Steve, you wanted an example, so I'll use a theoretical example that I don't know is correct or not. If we have to spend $100,000 in Puffin Place on those lots or something like that, because it's considered to be the SRA's responsibility, then we have to spend $100,000. It could be the same as Drayton Hillside with the bioswales. If we have to spend a whole bunch of money on a responsibility, that's not necessarily the assumption of debt. In fact, I would say that's not the assumption of debt. That's just taking on our responsibility for something that we must do within the CCNRs. The question about debt, and this is from the perspective of the Finance Committee and specifically me, is if we just decide to get out a long-term loan or something like that. And the provision says, or the resolution says, if it's going to be paid back within 12 months, it's fine. If we take out a temporary loan where it's going to be paid back within 12 months, that's the intent of it, and that's the loan, well, that would be fine. But anything that's considered to be long-term, which is an obligation for the community for a long period of time, that's when the board at that time would need to go to the community, present a business case, and then say, rather than using our cash, we would like to get debt. Here are the terms of the debt or whatever. So maybe I'm Steve Haynes, maybe I'm thinking a little bit differently than you are on what that means or not, but that's the way I look at it.
Well, John?
So I have two questions. One, back to the Puffin Place example. Was there any affirmative acceptance on SRA's part of this CCR change that gave SRA liability for those roads, Steve? Or was this a unilateral change to CCRs?
The change was voted on and approved.
By,
Declarant may have done that, Steve.
Hmm?
I think the declarant may have done that.
but without SRA's approval?
They were still in charge of the association at that point, John. They didn't turn over control until 2009.
Of the greater SRA you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Question 2 is in that last paragraph, it literally states any liability and goes on to reference an assumption of a maintenance, repair, or other obligation. So using a hypothetical, let's say that through whatever means, SRA acquires responsibility to repair some neighborhood bioswale that would fall under this definition of liability and repair. That would mean that this would be acceptable up to 50,000. Is that what this says?
Steve, guys, else.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about debt / liability, financial, right? And then I think there's other conversations that are really talking about liability in the sense of acceptance of accountabilities and responsibilities.
Yes.
I think we're just talking financial though, Joe. Isn't this resolution? This resolution is just financial.
Correct.
Like debt, like borrowing.
This resolution is financial, but included in this is, and this may be sort of what Steve Haynes might be referring to, we want to make sure that the SRA cannot assume financial responsibility for responsibilities that are not the SRA's to take on. Now, John Palin, as an example, said it's very possible that a neighborhood might have to repair this or that, a specific neighborhood HOA, and they don't. And then we may attempt to make a negotiation to take it on their behalf, whatever it might be. That is what this resolution is also trying to avoid, to not allow the SRA to take on NHOA responsibilities if they exist.
So let me just kind of relive an example of why we have to be careful about this. Carnoustie is a situation where we have a bioswale failing that could be impacting downhill SRA properties. And you have an HOA that elects not to form. Now, let's just take those things out of the equation. You have an HOA that doesn't respond, will not respond, actually objects to it, but it has the propensity to create a lot of downhill problems and also create a problem for the homeowners that are there So I think we have to be a little bit careful with this because, you know, the SRA is required to step in and and enforce those CCNRs. And when you have an HOA that isn't funded or a declarant that won't do it, and the only option you have is to fix it and build them. And, you know, either that or forget about it and let the problem become a disaster. So I'm not sure, Joe.
So Doug, I agree with what you're saying. We may have the responsibility as the umbrella HOA in the whole scheme of things to get it done if one of the neighborhood HOAs doesn't. However, what this is intending to get at is that, this is the way I understand it, is that we don't take it on as our responsibility from the SRA. We do it because it needs to get done. And then we lean the other NHOA, or whatever word you want to call it, make sure that there is an obligation to the other NHOA to quote unquote pay us back, if that's the right terminology. It's not, I mean, I don't want to bring up the what we've just gone through over the last few months and what was still in process, but it feels like there was a deal struck in that particular situation that might be difficult with a certain amount, or if it exceeded that amount, who's responsible for it? That's what this is trying to do. We may have to pay for it, but that doesn't mean that we owe it. We're going to try and recover the money. Something like that.
I don't think that this says that though.
Yeah,
So April just sent out an email. Did you, there's on chat, April just sent out an email to everyone. And this isn't just coming from April, this is coming from me and the finance committee and a group of other people. The existing CCNRs allow for the SRA to take over NHOA responsibilities or liabilities as long as they follow the procedures in the CCNRs. The purpose of the resolution is to ensure that the SRA does not take on open-ended liabilities or debt without following the procedures specified in the CCNRs, which is why the tag down at the bottom of the resolution is there.
Steve?
I'm just going to suggest that the language is unclear enough that I believe it creates a real opportunity for a lot of litigation if one of these situations arises. I don't think we're going to resolve that tonight. And I think this requires more sober consideration, some external advice, and make sure that the purpose of the resolution, with which I'm sympathetic, is actually carried out and doesn't create a situation where we get into more trouble and more litigation and that sort of thing than we would under the current circumstances.
So did the governance committee look at this, and Jeff, what's the position of the governance committee?
Well, the governance committee looked at these and we put forth the revised version without the paragraph at the bottom that we're discussing. Because we felt that we needed to have the ability to enforce an NHOA issue or address an issue that had not been addressed by the NHOA. And therefore, there could be a possibility to take on debt to mitigate this issue. So we felt that this was something that would create, risk for the SRA to carry out its responsibilities, overall responsibilities for the community. Did I state that correctly, governance committee members?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that we didn't have a problem with the overall intent of limiting new debt. But we did have real concerned about how it impacted, at least the way we read it, how that impacts the ability to enforce and compliance. And, you know, it may be that we have to lean and we have a receivable, but this really doesn't talk to that.
I guess, Joe, this whole resolution came from the Carnoustie example, is that correct?
Well, you could say recent events, you know, often flavor the thoughts of how things get done up in resolutions, but the way that it was, the way that that agreement was created, which seemed to override what the board should be able to do in coming up to an agreement to take on potential liabilities of an NHOA. Yeah, you could say that definitely flavored it. It was not pointing to that, but that's a recent example that we're looking at to say, well, we'd prefer that the board doesn't try and take on these types of liabilities. That shouldn't be the boards in the first place.
Well, I think the boards, every board would try to avoid those things if they can, see?
So in the hope of having something positive come out, I'd like to propose an amendment that we remove the final paragraph of this proposed resolution.
Is there a second to that amendment? Jane, is that a second? Thank you. So any further discussion?
Yeah, that doesn't stop the process of looking hard at the intent of this paragraph. It just gives us time to do it well, and do it right.
Yeah, the ability to really focus in on the concern that we have, which is be able to enforce.
Yeah, because the paragraph above does say an enforcement action to enforce the governing documents of the association is an exception. That's good. But I think we could make some progress toward the intent and exercise our duty to the community to be sure that the intent of the final paragraph is done in a way that's clear and isn't going to be potentially harmful.
Joe?
Our position as the finance committee is that the board should not, and this is in the chat, so I'm just repeating what's in the chat. The board should not be able to take on debt without the approval of the membership if it was not in the budget. That is the intent of this resolution, and it is believed that that last paragraph, it forces the board to go to membership and say, hey, here's our business case to take on debt. When I say membership, I mean residents.
It doesn't even have the word debt in it. It has liability, which is a much broader term than debt.
Then perhaps we should change the word to financial debt or terminology to financial debt. I don't know. That's the intent. So I don't know if that particular word. Go ahead.
My point, Joe, is the intent is good. The language is too loose and open to interpretation, and it will create the opportunity for someone who feels aggrieved to tie us up legally for a lot of expense that I think we can avoid if we get this done right.
I mean, we were of the opinion, Joe, that the paragraph above captures enough of the intent behind what you described. So I don't see a reason why this can't still be considered without the language in the final paragraph.
Okay, well, perhaps. So we're still talking about the amendment, right? That's what the motion is on the floor right now. So if we remove the final paragraph, or if that's what the board thought was appropriate, I think I would prefer, or we would prefer, that there be something to go forward to the community rather than nothing to go forward to the community. So if the final paragraph was removed, would that quote unquote satisfy a number of you for perhaps saying yes or no, I'm not asking for your vote yes, your vote no, but would that perhaps make it easier for this to move forward? Rather than not move forward at all at this point in time?
I think if we move forward without the last paragraph, we're fine. And maybe we come back and address. John?
Can someone reiterate or maybe try explaining it a little bit different way? What is wrong with the last paragraph?
Yes, liability is a term that is not purely financial. It's not specified. There are broad other forms of responsibility that could be considered liability. Furthermore, when you get down into maintenance, repair, or other obligation, there's no financial implication. There is not necessarily a financial implication of that. There's nothing stated that it's debt required by maintenance and stuff. So I'm sure that there are attorneys who would love us to put this into the CC&R because it'll be an income source for them. But this is it's just not clear and crisp and to the point of the intent. It's too broad and too easily misinterpreted or interpreted in other ways that will get in the way of the operation, the appropriate operation of this community.
I don't know if there's going to be any more debate on this particular one. So, maybe given the information that each of us have, it's best to bring it to a vote.
Can I make a comment, please?
On the amendment first. All in favor of Steve's amendment to eliminate the last paragraph, raise your hand. So Jane, Patricia, Steve, Jeff, Bill, myself. And then 4 against. John?
Against?
Against? Jane against?
No, Jane voted.
No, Jane for. Yeah, Steve, guys else?
What am I voting against?
Removing the last paragraph.
The vote was to remove that last paragraph. And the 3 of you, John and Joe, are voting no, correct? To leave it in?
Correct.
Yes.
I would vote to leave it in. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I would like to, I would vote to amend it to say, assuming that we are following proper CC&Rs. Meaning,
That's not there.
Yeah.
no, it's not there.
There, Steve.
That wasn't the amendment.
Yeah.
That we were voting on. We were just voting on the amendment. So. Okay, so
3.
So now we would move forward with the resolution without that last paragraph. There's a motion on the floor. More discussion about the resolution as it stands. And I understand this is just the board's support of the resolution. This resolution. Now, if the finance committee brings forth a different version of this without board approval, they can certainly do that. But I would think that the last sentence of the revision of the last sentence of the proposed resolution is different than the last sentence of the resolution that the governance committee sent back. So
Well, I believe you've already voted successfully to amend it so that the last paragraph doesn't exist anymore, is what's being voted on now. Is that correct, or am I offside?
Yeah, what the motion is now is to accept this, to support this resolution, get board support of this resolution, less that last paragraph. My statement to the board was that the governance committee sent back to the finance committee this resolution that has a different last sentence in that first paragraph,
Which we don't see.
which we can't see with this.
Do you have that version of the last paragraph?
I have the version.
The last
It's gonna be
sentence.
difficult though to,
Well, to your point earlier, Doug, that's not what we've got on the table.
correct. So, is there any further discussion about this resolution or support for this resolution? Okay, then I'll ask the question. All in favor of the board support of this resolution, less the last paragraph? Raise your hand. Okay, and all of those that oppose board support for this resolution, raise your hand. Okay, so John, are you abstaining?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody will know, except for John abstaining.
So does that effectively mean that nothing will go forward on as a board resolution for debt, correct?
This will not go forward from the board resolution. That's correct.
Okay.
With board support.
All right.
Am I correct in recalling that the other proposal from the finance committee was supported by the board?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
So with that, I believe that ends my agenda items, which were the treasurer's report and the finance committee.
Okay, Steve?
I would like to suggest that the board make a statement or whatever, in whatever form like that we would like to work with the finance committee to arrive at an amendment to the CCNR that meets the intent, and we believe is working.
I think that's a great idea. In fact, maybe I don't know if we could somehow do that between now and the time that the package goes to the printer to work those issues out. Probably not enough time. I don't know.
But it's important that the intent is understood. We just need to refine it.
Okay.
And just to let you know, as Doug, you mentioned earlier, the resolution will become a member resolution, which will be going forward to the AGM.
Okay.
Joe, does that mean it's going to be that resolution, or do you think I don't know, maybe will the members who are leading that clean that up to make it clearer? Because if they do, perhaps the board would support as well.
I would imagine it'll be, if not exactly this one, there may be a couple of word changes because Steve Haynes brought up a couple issues which may be good for clarification, like debt versus liability. And I understand what both of them are. So there will be a discussion. I'm just letting you know, just for interest's sake, that it probably will go to the board. It will go to the AGM package. It was there last year and it almost passed if a couple of units voted. So it's going to be brought forward again because it was believed by residents that it should.
One thing that the finance committee might want to consider is taking the resolution that the governance committee forwarded and then dealing with the last part of the resolution separately. And as you say, it's real simple to do a community vote thing and propose that sometime later.
That might be fine. We'll have to have that discussion, of course, in the next short while because the AGM package has to start being prepared next week.
Yeah, I think that we have to do that before it goes to printer. So.
Yep, that's fine. But I will generally be quiet for the rest of the meeting, so the floor is to other people.
Steve, ASC committee?
Yeah, we've provided minutes, which cover the regular business. There are 3 issues mentioned. I mentioned earlier that we think that we're going to need to survey and permanently mark the buffers in privacy. The reason for that is that we've already received several requests for changes in the buffers. And the rules that apply to the 2 different buffers are different. And it's not clear where one starts and the other ends. So we're going to, in order to appropriately apply the rules of the organization to these requests for change in the buffers, we have to know where the buffers are precisely. And so we're going to be requesting the funds to get that survey done, and we're searching for bids now. Secondly, we've discussed the CCs, the construction coordinator, compliance consultants' salary and budget, and the need to decide what goes into redoing the fee structure for new and remodel submittals.
Let me just ask a kind of a dumb question, and that is, does SRA have the ability to go in and establish corners and setbacks via survey on private property?
We have the right to enforce the CC&Rs.
Right.
And we can't equitably and legally enforce those CC&Rs unless we know exactly where those boundaries are. So that is our basis for assuming that we have the ability to do that. The SRA and the ASC has in the CC&Rs an easement to go on the property, but not where the house is, not through the house. To go on the property to do what it needs to do to enforce the rules. So those things seem fairly solid. I'm sure that there's a risk that someone may object.
Yeah, I just wonder, corners off 6 inches or something. John?
To me, this would seem like another case where it would be a cost of a survey and placing pins or whatever that is driven by a homeowner request, and the homeowner should bear the cost of that. So I would propose that in Carnoustie or wherever it is, that someone who is making a request related to a buffer bear the cost of the survey. And I would propose the ASC consider that.
It would be vastly more expensive if each individual homeowner had to have the survey done separately than if it were done at once. 2, you can argue that we're the ones, the SRA is the one that needs that information. If without that information, we can't legally and equitably enforce the rules. And so all the requests will just have to go on hold. That's not meeting our responsibility to the community. We're required to enforce those CC&Rs. It's not very good customer service and membership to say we can't because it's not surveyed. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay for the survey because we don't make any charge for anything we do other than new construction or major remodels that comes even close to that. So I see it as an SRA, a need that the SRA has in order to properly enforce its CCNRs in this unique circumstance.
Steve Geisels. No, you're on mute.
You're,
What, if any, accountability and responsibility is there by the Carnoustie Homeowners Association to make sure that the buffer is properly maintained?
In their CCNRs, it is their responsibility. The organization has members, but it has no active leadership. It has never taken an action. It is recalcitrant. It is not incorporated. It is recalcitrant to repeated requests to become organized.
So we will then cover their responsibility and accountability because they refuse to organize, which again, something I've said before is unfair to those who are doing the right thing, the neighborhood homeowner associations.
It is this SRA's responsibility through the AFC and stated in the Carnoustie CCNRs to enforce those rules. We have to approve changes. The AFC of the SRA has to approve changes in those buffers. That's in the CCNRs of Carnoustie. If there were an active association, they would still have to come to us and we would have to make a judgment about approving or not approving those changes.
Okay.
I didn't write the rules. I just have to make them work.
So Steve, are you asking for permission to have a survey done?
Yeah,
Is that something?
but we don't have the precise estimates.
So will that come the next?
It should come to the next meeting, and we're just putting the requests on hold until we are able to do that. And then my final statement has already been looked at, but stormwater is becoming a daily issue for us.
That's
And
connecting to the stormwater system?
connecting new construction to the stormwater system within 700, yes. We're now being asked to approve the connections and all that sort of thing, because it's not city responsibility. John and I need to work on this, get the city really clear about where it starts and we stop and the other way around. We need a deep dive into how much expertise we need to do this right, the inspections, potential repairs, and so on, and whether that is going to be within the organization or whether that's another thing because of the expertise involved that should be outsourced. I'm delighted to hear that the stormwater system is being looked at, but nobody could find a map of it in the past. So I don't know if we have found one or if we're making one as we go, but there's little evidence that there's been active routine inspection and maintenance of the system. I don't know that. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying we can't find it.
We should ask Leroy if the city has it, because at one point the city did maintain it. I think you.
Well, I'm sure that when Ken Johns made his pencil map of it, I'm sure he asked the city when he did that. We need to do it formally and carefully.
Leroy may well know what it is.
Do we need a legal opinion? Do we have the responsibility to monitor that? Because if we haven't been doing it in the past, and the city of Blaine has been doing that, I mean, how does that get transferred to us?
It's not clear the city's been doing it.
Maintenance, I don't think the maintenance house has it, Debbie. It's always been us doing it, right?
Cleaning the storm vaults has been SRA's responsibility. And already have been doing that for our understanding, it's responsibility.
Yeah, so Steve, would it not be a builder responsibility to have an engineer come out and supervise and create the right drawings for the connection, supervise that connection?
The drawings we have, I mean, the things that we approve are there's all kinds of good stuff on there. But there's been very little willingness, anybody to check on. I mean, we don't have a rule that says that you have, stormwater is almost absent. It in fact is absent from the current standards for residential construction. It's in the revised version that we're going to propose soon. But it's a mystery item as far as I can tell until now.
Okay. Scary stuff. John?
In the Carnoustie bioswale issue that has come up recently, there are drawings which do seem to show the sewer structure and connections at a macro level, not at the homeowner level. Would those similar sorts of drawings not potentially be available from past declarants?
Yeah, I think they are. It's the task of taking each lot and putting it into a semi-AMU wide map. It's a big task. You know, we'll have to decide. We hope somebody's got it. We don't think so. We'll have to decide how that should best be done, whether it could be integrated into Jacob Lee's system, because the system he uses to do the mapping of semi-AMU is a system commonly used to do the maps of stormwater. So it may be possible to get that information and get it in there, but it's not going to be cheap.
Okay, anything else on ASC, Steve?
We have some things in executive session. But that's,
Okay. All right, next up is Elections Committee. Helen, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you very much. I've been sitting listening to all of it. Good old stormwater. It's always there. You've all had the minutes, you've had our written report. Clearly dates have slipped. Dates for things being prepared. We had the deadline we all approved of August 30th, but we had town halls and everything else. And so the timetable has slipped. I was interested to hear Debbie say that the 24th was the drop dead day. When the election committee met with Lori, you know, and it was the 22nd, which is why we set that date for the election committee to go over and do the final review, proofread, etc. The packet. If it has to be the 24th, I hope the committee are able to reschedule. By the way, I have a committee that is absolutely fabulous, and they have worked an awful lot more than they ever planned to this year. They come to meetings, they do their homework, they do their work. So we need a confirmation on that. But what we do need is to get the material. And this really is a plea. When we send out the ballots this year, it's going to say what the threshold vote is, the quorum for this, the quorum for that, the percentage you need for CCNRs, the fact that the budget, the action of the members, the owners, is to ratify. So that detail is in there. It's in the election manual templates. They've been looked at, and everything seems to be in order, certainly legally. So please get the material in. We've already got the candidates material done. That section's complete. We now need the budget material and the resolutions, because they may have different vote thresholds, etc. So I know there's one board resolution, I see on the agenda, there are 2 more potential. I'm not sure, Joe, whether yours is going to be, let's wait for another couple of months and see how it can be reworded, or it's going to end up coming in this package. If it's in this package, it needs to be done quickly. On some of these, if I can make just a personal comment, listening to the debate on things such as that debt resolution, I have 2 questions. 1, has it been reviewed by legal counsel? 2, how do other homeowners associations handle this? We're clearly not the only one that have ever dealt with this. So maybe CAI has some good advice and experience that they could share with us. So I just toss that out so that when anything goes to the membership, we know that it's legally sound and being vetted and very clearly written, and that maybe we didn't have to reinvent the wheel, that somebody else did it for us. So my plea, Mr. Chairman, is get your material in, please, as soon as you can. It'll make life easier for Lori, certainly, and Justine. And one thing, just before this meeting started, I got an email that the letters to the 200 plus people who still get everything by mail, whether they're new people or people who like getting mail, asking for their agreement to receive things electronically, went out. And Mr. Treasurer, that saves us a bunch of money. So that should bring a smile to Joe's face. So there you are. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions for Helen? And thank you to the committee for the hard work. And I know that it's a lot of work to get this all pulled together. So thank you. All right, communications, Patricia.
So we had our monthly meeting. We addressed just a couple of things just regarding some templates that we are creating and working closely with the ASC. Just trying to create for a procedure how to address certain issues as a general things. The main point of the communications committee is basically anything that leaves from this office or from any other committee. It really represents the whole board. And what we're trying to avoid is any instantaneous feedback to questions arise personally or by each resident. So if there's a question addressed to an ASC or governance committee or so, we would like just to have it not respond immediately, just as an act of there's a question and then come back. I mean, it happened a long ago with there was a member who wrote just asking questions about certain issues, and there was an answer immediately put without, making a point of just taking it back, having us discuss about it. So we would like to avoid those things as an immediate answer. But having said that, we're making progress. We just would like to make sure that any response has an end to what we're trying to do, not just as something that is on the works.
So as I understand what the communications committee would like for all board members to do, and I think staff members, is if as questions from the community come in, and there's a desire to get something back out to them quickly, then what we need to do is channel it over to the communications committee to take a look at it.
Yeah, sure. Just to be as a CC, we don't have to make a decision, but we would like to know, we would like to be aware of what it is, and just try to avoid, an immediate response to it without addressing it because anything that leaves here, it represents the whole board. And we would like to make sure that any response being done has an end to it. It's not something, well, we're working on it. I don't think that that's a proper answer to that. It's just that, if we address something, something comes to us, well, this is what we're doing, this is our plan, and this is what we're taking action for. So nothing like, we're thinking about. something like that. So we just need to have an end to an answer or to a question that is being proposed or asked.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
Well, I just restating sort of my opinion on that. I think it's good to have a process, a response process. Because I've learned about some responses that have happened without being aware of them initially. And I think, as you say, as a board, we should all be aware that there is a response that's been prepared and in some cases already sent. Because we may be asked about it somehow and we're not aware of it. So I think there should be a protocol, communications protocol, not to be bureaucratic, and not to be overly, obsessive on it. But I think just for clarity of communication and information sake and awareness, we all need to be in the loop prior to responses being sent.
I agree with that, and that's our whole intention on that. Besides that, there was a subject that arose, that came up about the anonymous comments or anonymous questions, basically, through the town halls. It was discussed again through emails. Again, that kind of wording or so, that's probably something that we have to discuss during the board meeting or so. It is my recommendation that all town halls should also follow the same regulations or procedures that were done, that are being done on all the AGMs, as for stating their names, address, and so then address, the questions or any comments on that. I don't know what is the rest of the board's feeling about that. If you would like to discuss more.
I think there was pretty much general consensus, the fact that it was almost, I think I heard from everybody that they do not support responding to anonymous questions. And I think that there probably should be a motion, if the board takes that position, there should be a motion that creates a protocol for people that want response from the board.
This is a good example, Doug, because I wasn't aware of this. I agree, absolutely agree that we should have, but just looking at this communication was going back and forth. But not all the board members were included. This discussion was going back between all of you guys. So just as a case in point, I think we need to have better clarity and make sure everyone's in the loop on that. But I agree that we shouldn't have anonymous comments.
So probably on the next, I don't know how many more town halls we're going to have in the future, but if there's another one coming out, we probably should point that out, that, if you would like to address, have a question or something, you have to follow the same procedure that is done at the AGM.
Is there a motion to create?
I make the motion to have any future town halls follow the same procedure as they are stated up for the AGM.
Is it just town halls, or is it town halls, AGMs, board meetings, and and anonymous questions that come to Debbie?
I guess so. Yeah, all of them.
So basically, anonymous questions and anonymous kind of get ignored unless there's a name and address.
That will be probably a lot more. It will
Is
carry
that the
on.
consensus
It will
of
cover
everybody?
pretty much everything.
It also assures that we're getting those comments from members of the community.
Right. Okay, is there a second to? Thanks, John, Palin.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, Bill?
I made a comment that we should also request or insist that the participants in Zoom meetings have their name spelled out, first and last name, so that we know who they are. Quite often you'll have anonymous silhouette, which is fine, if someone who's interested in having a real person display. But underneath there's a significant number of people who don't identify themselves as being participants in the meeting. They could be members.
That's true. There's been some discussion about how do we make sure that we're just getting community members on our Zoom calls for town halls. So,
Yeah, for example, who is John P?
Busted.
well,
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
So John, isn't what is showing there how you have your computer named?
I don't think so. I don't know exactly how, well, someone just changed it on me. Lori must have changed it. So I don't know how that gets established, but I must have typed in John P at one point.
So in the right corner of your little Zoom box is 3 dots right beside mute. If you click on that down at the bottom, I'm seeing rename.
That's what I just did. It's really easy to do.
I'm not seeing that on an iPad. I don't see that.
I'm fairly certain you have the opportunity to identify yourself at every Zoom meeting.
I think only the first one, because I don't have to do it anymore. So
I changed my identification for different Zoom meetings. I mean, I go to the amateur radio one and I add my call sign.
Okay.
So you can quickly tailor it. But I noticed there were several people at this meeting.
So if you're looking at the screen where you have all the people showing their videos, it's there where you have the mute and the 3 dots on yourself, on your own picture of yourself. Those 3 dots are where you can hit the rename button and rename yourself.
I don't have the 3 dots.
Okay. So do you want to change the motion to include an accurate name on the Zoom screens? John?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So in a town hall or a meeting like this, and someone only has their first name and initial, or some other non-compliant sort of a name, are they going to get kicked off, or what? What's the recourse?
Well, if somebody addresses that, we just would like them to address who they are or where they live before they address the board, or they would like to take, the stand. But we will request for them to identify themselves.
So it's probably easier just to keep that motion as anonymous, and let's deal with just being anonymous for now. And maybe as we move on and do more Zoom stuff, we can get a little bit more entrenched in that.
We don't really need much for it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a reasonable request.
So I'm going to call the question on Patricia's motion. All in favor? Raise your hand. Any opposition? Okay, it passes. Anything else?
Nope, we're done.
Yep. Okay. Safety and security.
Oh, Doug, can I ask a question about communication?
Yeah.
Yes.
So a few months ago, one of our discussions of significance that I thought was going to be addressed to the community was let's call it maintenance monthly or maintenance update or something like that, because there were a lot of questions about what the hell is going on in the community and maintenance. And this isn't you, John, targeted, but it's a sort of set of an update, because I think there's weekly e-blasts to let the community know what's going on, maybe that week, maybe the next couple of weeks, on an ongoing basis. As an example, I know, because I remember reading it, that in the last couple of days of every month, the street sweeper comes along. But when that was announced a couple of months ago, that was the only time it was ever announced. We've now had things about the curb, the curb ramps and other things going on. I guarantee you that people have no idea when the street sweeper is coming by, when they're parking in the street and they're leaving their curb ramps down. That would be an example, I think, of something that would be desirable to have, because the board a few months ago expressed that we want to do something like that to let community know what are we doing this week, next month, whatever, in maintenance.
That's a good reminder, Joe, and I think that really falls on Debbie's desk to make sure that Bruce has that on his to-do list.
Yes.
Okay. All right, safety and security.
Okay. My committee hasn't met since our June 30th meeting, but we are scheduled to meet next week, September 22nd, and we have Officer Landis from the Bellingham Police Department coming in to talk to us about neighborhood watch and community emergency response programs. And I, new to the committee, to the chair, I have a little bit of apprehension about getting off a neighborhood watch program. Since going through all the paperwork, it looks like this was started back in 2015, but never took hold. And I'm thinking that we'll probably have to go with a decentralized approach versus a full SRA type of oversight. So we're going to need the committee's help, and any feedback that you guys want to give me, I'd be welcome.
Terrific. Anything else, Jane?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, so governance, so we talked about most of our work over the last few weeks in Joe's, part of Joe's presentation. Really for the last couple of weeks, we've been focused on one issue and only one issue, and that's the resolutions that were presented. We had a few meetings specifically around that. There are no minutes because it would have been difficult to try and put minutes down. The discussion was very robust, and so we will have some sort of simple minutes for the next meeting, sort of documenting what we discussed. Just to not belabor what we have already said, we provided the Finance Committee with slightly modified language for the 4 resolutions, but in the case of the 2 that we have not discussed, we basically left the language largely as it was presented to us in the drafts. So if we take each one of those separately, one is about the independence of elections, which makes sense. Just logically, it makes sense. It's like an audit function. You need to have that separate, independent. So without going and reading it again, I think it's pretty straightforward. My suggestion would be to make a proposal to accept the motion. Sorry, I was just losing the word. Make a motion to accept this as it was sent to all of us today by you, Doug, about the independence of elections.
Well, we're a little bit out of sync on our agenda, but I think it's fine. I think we should just go ahead and work through both of those resolutions. So,
well,
is there a second to your
governance committee report? No.
What's that?
Is it the governance committee report? Is that what it is?
Well, the agenda actually called for the review of those under new business, but we can do it now.
No, let's just do it now because it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that was the focus of our discussion, our meeting. So anyway, there's the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Patricia? All right, any discussion, any further discussion on the elections resolution, independence of elections? Joe?
The only thing that I'd add, which is what we modified on ours, was if the board thinks it's a good thing to do through, maybe changing the word member resolution to board resolution, to make it as though the board supports it. And that'll be for the next one as well.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I had not noticed you'd sent that and it makes sense to me, Joe.
Yeah,
It
it was
wasn't
on the
number
other two,
one.
it wasn't on this one. It's, and we could have changed it, but it was in a PDF. Bill?
Yeah, have you considered that you're excluding a large number of possible candidates and their expertise? Because it appears that there's a lot of people who are not allowed to be involved in that. Did that?
Yes, it did come up, and
What was your conclusion?
well, the description, of any related member is very broad and ambiguous. But that conceptually, it makes sense.
Okay, did I understand correctly that anyone who's ever served on the board is excluded from that? Then I misunderstood.
For the last period of time, right?
12 months, it says.
Oh, I missed the 12-month part. Okay.
Yeah.
12 months.
All right, that's.
So it's a good point you make, Bill, because we did in our discussion, number five is related to any member. So there are some words, but we felt conceptually this made sense. So it was our recommendation to move forward.
Any further discussion? All right, I'll ask the question. All in favor of board support for this resolutions? Raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous.
Okay, and then the other one, the language is always, and same thing here, it's board, so we like Joe's suggestion, make it a board resolution, not a member. And this was really about non-voting members of the board, that we shall not create any positions that, are non-voting members. And so the language here was not changed from what was provided to us as a draft by the Finance Committee, with the exception of the last sentence, which says nothing herein is intended to prevent the general manager from participating board members to assist the board directors in having access to confidential information. Because as we read the text in the previous paragraph, that technically speaking, as we read it, the general manager would not be able to access information shared by duly elected members of the board. And we feel that it's important that the general manager have access to that information to manage the corporation. So other than that, we are okay. We were okay with the language of the resolution. So
the question is, how do you correct the resolution as presented?
We added the sentence there that allows the general manager to be part of the board.
Yeah, the resolution before the board includes that.
Okay. In other words, you had some negotiations with the original.
That's what I just said. We added the one sentence.
I heard,
Is there a motion for this?
So I would like to make a motion that we adopt, or we support this amendment as presented regarding the non-voting member.
Is there a second? Bill? Thank you for your second. Any further discussion about this? Joe?
The only thing I wanted to, I know Jeff said probably in error, said that the finance committee brought to us. We had nothing to do with that. The only two resolutions we brought forward were the debt and spending.
Okay, well, they were all in the same email, so I figured that they were all on the finance committee. All right, so if there's no further discussion, all in favor? Okay, no opposition. Perfect.
That's it. Then.
Thank you, Jeff. Maintenance. John.
I really have nothing to report. I see that Debbie put into the board packet an email from a resident, Brian Johnson, about a proposal he makes to basically take a year off of street sweeping and ask residents to take care of the property and the street in front of their house. So it's just included in your packet for reference and discussion.
Steve? In the little bit of work I've done looking into maintenance of stormwater systems, street sweeping gets a chapter in a lot of manuals for stormwater maintenance. So the response is it's not a luxury. It's part of maintaining the stormwater system.
Okay, any further discussion?
I think what Steve said sums it up. It's mandatory, and we have no choice.
Yeah, I would agree. Yep. And I think that after the storm, we got, I don't know how many, but we got a lot of people asking, when are we gonna get the streets swept? So,
Yeah, that's okay.
anything else, John?
No, that's all.
Thank you. Jennifer, environmental.
It's actually Bill.
Was it Bill? Oh, sorry, Bill. Yeah, that's right.
Bill,
That's right. It used to be Jennifer.
but I'm here to support.
Okay, the topics that we've been addressing have been moving from the August meeting, which is where you have the minutes here, and for further discussion took place in the September meeting, and they consist of discussions about electric recommendations and how to go about transitioning the landscape companies to quieter electric leaf blowers and other devices. We've had a lot of inputs from members on the use of herbicides and pesticides. It's going to be an ongoing discussion, so we can be more precise about what our recommendations are. But there's a lot of activity in part of the members. And Jennifer, I understand, has completed her survey single-handedly, in spite of our offering assistance. She, in spite of being hospitalized once or twice, has done the job, and we all should appreciate her efforts in that regard. And that's ongoing for contributions in that. And there's been a suggestion that the environmental committee is going to generate an environmental survey to determine the level of support, the activities that we're focusing on in the community. How will be addressed at next meeting. And we have a regular meeting time now, which is the first Thursday of every month. And will take place at 2:30, which we accommodate some of the needs of the members on the committee. The law to sort that out, but we're comfortable with on that.
Can you all hear Bill okay on the Zoom?
I should take off my mask, sorry. And we have one proposal which you have in your package. On page 44, which is some minor revisions to the guidelines for maintenance of undeveloped lots. It turns out there were some questions from the folks who were trying to comply with these, and there was some inconsistencies in the recommendations. Jennifer has rewritten it based on some of the inputs regarding trees overhanging the roads and the amount of clearance. And you have this here. The committee agrees that this is a necessary modification. So I would have a motion that the board accept these updates to the guidelines.
Is there a second?
Do you have a second?
Steve Haynes, that was.
Yes.
Is there any discussion about these guidelines?
No questions? Okay.
Jennifer, would you like to make any comments about the work you did? You're muted.
Just briefly to explain why I had to make a few changes. Somebody rightly responded with, well, if you say no more than 10 feet, that could be 0, which could mean don't clear it at all. And I was extremely embarrassed to admit that, yes, that's true, which is why I changed it to 5 to 10 and said no more than 10 unless required. There are many lots where if you try to clear more than 10 feet, you would fall down a slope. And so 10 feet seems like a sufficient length to require. And as far as the trees are concerned, what we're going to say in the letters, if there are trees that are 14 feet or lower that overhang the road, is to please contact the ASC so that somebody from the ASC can look at those trees and make a recommendation, because some of them are hitting the street sweeper. And lastly, I put sidewalk in where it said clear in front of the roads, because there's at least one place here in Semiahmoo where there's actually a sidewalk rather than a road, and there's vegetation over the sidewalk.
Terrific. I thought it was a good document, it was comprehensive. So any other discussion about the document? Okay, then I'll ask the question. All in favor? And it appears that there is no opposition.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks to the committee. Let's see. You want to give us an update on the website, Debbie?
We met with Jake Lee yesterday, and he's nearing completion. We have a follow-up meeting with him on the 23rd to review and edit, and then we're scheduling a live reveal on October 4th at 4 o'clock via Zoom to introduce the website and orientation to the site.
So it looks like it's just about done. Terrific. And I see here rule change and feedback.
So that was the requirement that we did not follow and went back to seek input from community members on the curb ramp policy, raised beds, and I don't think we had any comments on the temporary structures. So the board had an opportunity to review those comments. First, it was just that they have the approved product. There was a comment from a resident on Great Horned Owl that they didn't feel the board has the right to change the rules without the approval of the community. That's why we're asking for input. They don't agree with the existing curb ramp And raised beds, they don't agree that that needs to be approved by the board. And then there was another comment on curb ramps. They just thought maybe it was a little heavy-handed on how it had to be, they had to be maintained. And then the other, just basically making a comment that the curbing is difficult for any type of car, and but they do have curb ramps and they are legal. And then the raised bed, they were talking about putting a limit on the size depending on the lot size. So those are the comments that we received, and we sent out this to the entire community. So with those comments, I don't know if the board wants to consider any changes to how the rules are written, but we did receive community input.
Steve, just a little historical comment, and you'll see how many little issues get intertwined. The original, a previous, either ASC or board, was asked to ban curb ramps from the community because the street sweeper could pick them up and fling them and cause trouble. That clearly was not a good idea because these are hard on cars and so on. So a fair amount of effort was put into determining which curb ramps would not be liable to be flipped around by the street sweeper. The reason for specifying certain brands is because of their substantial size and weight, and design features such as not blocking the flow of water under the ramp along the curb, which, I mean, these are designed to carry water. And that's the background on why the rules look a little tough. The maintenance requirement is that although the approved ones have a channel to allow water to flow, the water includes leaves and mud and dead animals and all kinds of things, and they collect in front of and underneath the ramps, and they need to be cleaned and restored to function on a regular basis. So we think the rules are reasonable, that they save curb ramps because they're important and useful, and that they keep them from becoming unruly or unsightly and dirty.
So Debbie, is there any board action required on anything of these rules and stuff right now?
I believe now that the notification has been provided, we've received input that these rules can stand in place. And so we can send out, Patricia, I'll work with you on an announcement for the community rules. We'll send them out again and let them know that they will be viewed by community, so on and so forth.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Next on the agenda is our executive session. There's several items for executive session. So Lori, can you take us to executive session? And
Absolutely. Give me a few moments, please.
do we record the executive sessions?
No. To restate what the action items were.
Yeah, would you do that, please?
Okay, so outcome of executive session is that a letter will be sent to the resident. The communications committee will work with the AFC. There'll be 3 notices of violation and hearing for 3 different residents. A lien has been filed on a property to recoup legal fees, and the agreement to ratify. Do you want to state that one? I'm not sure how to do that.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, and that's all.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody that's still on for the hard work these last 3 weeks. It's been a lot of work for a lot of folks, and I just want y'all to know that I appreciate it. I know everybody in this room appreciates it, and I know the community appreciates it as well. So with that, we stand adjourned.
Okay.